from the broadcast studio, hitting in the static. This ain't no bedtime story, son, it's prophetic. Encrypted signals from the shadows of the garden. We dig where the dirt got secrets, no parting. Microphone alchemist, scriptures with a twist. Peep the frequency, seeds in the mist. We drop bars like plagues, revelations in the cadence. Broadcasting truth while they trapped in surveillance. Wisdom with a watchman's blade. Fourth watch style while your whole system fade. Blood moons, Nephilim, echoes in the pine. Sasquatch stomping through the fault lines of time. We ain't mainstream, we ancient stream. Cipher with the prophets, decode the dream. So if you tuned in, better guard your mind. It's broadcasting seeds and we breaking the design.
All right, folks. Exodus, the War of the Gods. You ever read a story so old it feels brand new the moment you stop treating it like a children's book and start hearing it like a battlefield report? Well, this is Exodus. Not a tidy morality play, not polite Sunday school. This is a war story. It opens with a ruthless empire, a river that runs through its veins, and a king who believes he is a god. Into that machine walks a shepherd with a staff and a message that rattles the bones of the spiritual world. Let my people go. Translation for the gods of Egypt. Your time is up. Welcome to Broadcasting Seeds. I'm Bennett Tanton. And around here we look for the places where the visible worlds fray and the hidden world pushes through. Cryptids, conspiracies, the paranormal, biblical encounters, and the strange glue that binds them to real life. Today, we're stepping into the dust and heat of ancient Egypt, where the plagues were not random disasters, they were targeted strikes. The Nile runs against its worshippers. Frogs, gnats, and flies swamp the land like a mocking chorus. Livestock dies, boils bloom, hail shreds the skies, darkness swallows the sun that was supposed to be untouchable. Every hit humiliates a different god on Egypt's roster, and exposes the system behind their power. Not mythology as window dressing, mythology as a live wire behind the wall. And then there's the sea. People in their ancient Near East feared it for good reason. It was a symbol of chaos that swallows armies and memories. The moment that sea cracks open like a wound and stands at attention, the map of power redraws itself. That is not just a prison break. That is a military parade through the heart of the enemy. The finale happens on a mountain that looks like a volcano but behaves like a throne room. Fire, smoke, thunder. A nation stands still while the commander speaks. This is where the law is given. Yes, but it is not. It is also where jurisdiction changes hands. Egypt no longer writes the spiritual rules for these people. The living God does. That is the part we forget when we shrink Exodus down to flannel board figures and polite memory verses. This is a hostile takeover of the unseen world, followed by the first steps of a free people who have to learn how to stay free. If you're new here, do me a solid. Like the show, share it with a friend, and leave a quick review. That is the fuel that keeps this thing in the air. If you have been writing with me for a while, you already know the drill. Hit the stars, drop the line, and tell someone who thinks the Bible is boring that they might be reading it wrong. So, Section 1. Pharaoh's Magicians, the opening skirmish. Picture the scene. You're standing in Pharaoh's throne room, walls dripping with gold, incense clouding the air, and the king himself sitting like a living god on his chair of power. Into this atmosphere strolls Moses and his brother Aaron, two desert wanderers with nothing but a shepherd's staff and a message that makes the whole place tense. Let my people go. Pharaoh doesn't flinch. He actually smirks. Why should he bow to some desert deity? He's got his own magic men, the elite priesthood who can summon gods, read omens, and bend nature's rules. The stage is set for what looks like a mismatch. You've got the most powerful sorcerers in the ancient world on one side, and on the other, two guys fresh out of exile. But this isn't just politics or theater. This is spiritual warfare going live. Aaron tosses down the staff, and boom, it becomes a serpent, a direct shot across the bow in the language of Egypt. Snakes weren't random in their culture. They were loaded symbols of chaos, danger, and divine power. Pharaoh's magicians laughed, tossed down their staves, and sure enough, they slither into serpents too. Score one for Egypt, right? Well, not so fast. Aaron's serpent eats theirs, and in that moment, the room shifts. It's subtle, but everyone knows these aren't parlor tricks. This is a bigger gun entering the room. And the magicians aren't out yet, though. They duplicate the Nile turning to blood. They conjure up frogs. For a minute, it looks like Yahweh is just another god on the roster. Another regional spirit flexing its muscles. But then the wheels come off. By the third plague, when Aaron strikes the dust and it swarms into gnats, the magicians tap out. They literally tell Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. Translation, boss, we're outclassed. We can't touch this. Here's the thing. In ancient warfare, the first battles set the tone. If your champion lost the opening duel and the whole campaign was already slipping, that's what happens here. The magicians, Egypt's frontline defense, the priestly special forces get exposed as small-time operators against Yahweh's power. Their tricks are just smoke compared to the actual fire. Think about the psychological impact. Pharaoh's entire system is built on the belief that he is divine, backed by gods, and reinforced by the magicians who prove it with ritual and power displays. Suddenly, that scaffolding starts to wobble. The magicians, the guys who are supposed to be untouchable, admit there's a force they can't explain or control. It's the equivalent of the Pentagon saying, yeah, our nukes don't work against this enemy. That's not just embarrassing, that's destabilizing. This wasn't about Moses winning a talent show. It was about Yahweh dismantling Egypt's spiritual backbone in public, on stage, with everyone watching. By humiliating the magicians, God shows Egypt's elite that their gods weren't gods at all, just cardboard cutouts waiting to be knocked over. And that's just the first salvo. The war hasn't even started yet. Section 2, the plagues as precision strikes. Let's get one thing straight. The plagues weren't random. They weren't God throwing dice and hoping the numbers spooked Pharaoh. They were deliberate, tactical strikes. Each one was aimed like a laser at the heart of Egypt's spiritual operating system. And when you zoom out, you see something wild. Yahweh was dismantling Egypt's gods one by one, like a hit list. Start with the Nile. Egypt didn't just rely on the river for survival, they worshipped it. The god Hapi, or Happy, Hapi, was thought to control its annual flood, bringing fertility to the land. So when the Nile turned to blood, this just wasn't an environmental disaster. It was a direct attack on Hapi. The river they thought was a lifeline turned into a death sentence. Fish died. The stench filled the land, and Egypt's god of abundance bled out in front of everyone. Next came frogs. Annoying, yes, but also humiliating. Frogs were sacred to Hekwit, the goddess of fertility, who had the head of a frog. Egyptians carved her image into charms for safe births. Yahweh floods the land with so many frogs that people can't even walk without stepping on them. Suddenly, the sacred system, the sacred symbol of fertility becomes a stinking curse. Imagine your nation's lucky charm turning into a nationwide infestation. That's the level of mockery going on here. Then the dust of Egypt turns into gnats and later swarms of flies. These weren't just irritating bugs. The gnats likely came from the dirt itself, undermining Geb, the earth god. The flies, they were a direct shot at Khepri, a solar deity often depicted with the head of a scarab beetle. The gods of earth and air were supposed to protect Egypt's space, but the space turned against them. Livestock dying in the fields wasn't just bad for food supply. It struck at Hathor, the cow-headed goddess of love and motherhood. The Apis, the bull god, worshipped, and Apis, the bull god, worshipped in sacred temples. Egypt's symbol of strength and nurture lay rotting in the sun. And then came the human body itself. Boils broke out on the skin of Egyptians and their animals. This was Yahweh humiliating Sekhmet, goddess of healing, and Imhotep, the god of medicine. Egypt's doctors, trained in rituals and remedies, stood powerless, scratching at their own sores. The sky itself fell next. Hail, mixed with fire, smashed crops and shredded Egypt's agricultural gods like Osiris, who was believed to control harvest and fertility of the land. By now, every layer of life, the river, earth, animals, humans, sky, had turned traitor against Egypt's gods. Then, darkness. Not a cloudy day, thick, smoldering, can't see your hand darkness for 3 days straight. This was the ultimate insult to Ra, the sun god, Egypt's most powerful deity. Pharaoh himself was considered the son of Ra, and yet Ra's light was snuffed out, leaving Pharaoh and his people groping in the dark. The empire's golden god blinked, and nothing happened. Finally, the knockout punch, the death of the firstborn. This was a direct strike at Pharaoh himself, who was worshipped as divine. His heir, his living proof of godhood, was taken. In one night, every household in Egypt, from palace to prison felt the collapse of their God's protection. This wasn't natural disaster. This was dismantling a spiritual empire piece by piece. The plagues revealed that behind Egypt's wealth, power, and prestige was a hollow scaffolding of false gods. Yahweh didn't just free Israel from slavery. He stripped Egypt's gods of their thrones and showed the watching world who really ruled. The war wasn't over, though. Egypt still had one card to play: raw military power, chariots, soldiers, Pharaoh's pride. And that leads us straight into the next battle, not on land, but on water, the sea, the ancient world's deepest symbol of chaos. Section 3, the Exodus and the Sea of Chaos. So, picture this. Pharaoh finally breaks. After the death of the firstborn, he lets Israel go. 2 million people, give or take, pack up and march out of Egypt with gold, livestock, and the bones of their ancestors. It's a mass exodus, a jailbreak on a scale that the world's never seen. But Pharaoh, true to form, can't stand the thought of losing. So he rallies his army, hundreds of chariots, basically the tanks of the ancient world, and charges after them. Israel's caught. On one side, the Egyptian army, thundering closer, the sound of hooves and wheels shaking the earth, and on the other, the Red Sea, a wall of water stretching into the horizon. No bridges, no ferries, just chaos. Now here's where the story cracks wide open. To the ancient Near Eastern mind, the sea wasn't just water. It was the great unknown, the home of chaos, monsters, the untamable abyss. Cultures all around Israel told stories of their gods wrestling with sea creatures: the Babylonian Tiamat, the Canaanite Leviathan, the Egyptian chaos serpent Apophis. The sea was feared as the ultimate symbol of disorder and death. No one controlled it. No one except Yahweh. Moses stretched out his staff and the sea splits like a zipper being pulled open. Walls of water rise on both sides and Israel walks straight through on dry ground. This isn't just a miracle of convenience. It's God's taking the most feared symbol of chaos and bending it into a highway for his people. It's like driving a parade down the throat of an enemy's monster. Then comes the finale. Egypt and their army barrels into the seabed, chariots racing, soldiers shouting. And for a heartbeat, it looks like maybe they'll catch Israel after all. But then the chaos that Yahweh controlled turns back against them. The waters crash, chariots are swallowed, horses vanish, and the greatest military power in the world drowns without a fight. Israel, I guess this is the kicker. Israel never lifts a sword. Not one spear, not one shield. God fights the battle himself, using creation as his weapon. This is cosmic warfare. The God of Israel doesn't just humiliate Egypt's magicians and gods. He humiliates their army, their pride, their might. He takes the realm of chaos, the one place no deity was supposed to have control, and shows absolute mastery. So, Psalm 74 later remembers this moment with language that strips away any doubt. You divided the sea by your strength. You broke the heads of the sea monsters in the water. For Israel, the Red Sea wasn't just survival, it was a revelation. Their God wasn't just a tribal deity. He was the Lord of chaos and one who makes the sea itself obey. When the last Egyptian chariot sinks beneath the waves, Israel doesn't just breathe relief. They erupt in song. Exodus 15 records what might be the first worship anthem in history. Quote, "The Lord is a warrior. The Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his army, he was hurled into the sea." That's not just praise. That's victory trash talk. That's the soundtrack of a nation watching their God rewrite the laws of reality. But the war of the gods isn't finished, because freedom isn't just about escaping chains or armies. Freedom has to be anchored somewhere, and that anchoring happens not at sea, but on a mountain wrapped in fire and smoke. Section 4, the Sinai, the mountain of fire and smoke. Now, I've actually been there to the traditionally held Mount Sinai in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. I lived in Egypt for about a year, and let me tell you, the place feels heavy with history. Now, at the base of the mountain sits St. Catherine's Monastery, one of the oldest functioning Christian monasteries in the world. Built in the 6th century by the Emperor Justinian, it guards a library second only to the Vatican. And I've been in there, and it is crazy. A treasure chest of ancient manuscripts and priceless icons. And right there within its walls is the site of the biblical burning bush, which we got to see as well. It's pretty. Yeah. Anyway, it was surreal. The same bush where Moses first encountered God. You can walk into that monastery, stand in that desert air, and feel like the line between heaven and earth is thinner than almost anywhere else. Now imagine that landscape 3,000 years ago. Israel camps at the base of Mount Sinai. The mountain is jagged, harsh, rising out of the desert like a fortress of stone. And then it comes alive. Thunder shatters the silence. Lightning cracks across the sky. The whole mountain trembles as smoke and fire pour down like a volcano erupting. The people stand at the base, staring up in terror, while the mountain itself becomes a throne room. In the ancient world, mountains were never just rock. They were sacred. Olympus, Zaphon, Ararat, the dwelling places of gods. And here, in the middle of the desert, Yahweh claims Sinai. Not with statues, not with idols, but with creation itself set ablaze. From the fire and smoke he speaks, not vague whispers, not a priest mumbling incantations. His own voice thunders down the slopes. What he gives isn't just moral advice. It's a covenant. The kind of treaty a conquering king gives his people. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. That opening line isn't about fear. It's about identity. God is saying, I rescued you. Now you are mine. For Israel, this wasn't just about receiving laws. It was about transferring allegiance. Pharaoh was no longer their ruler. Egypt's gods no longer wrote their fate. Their king was now the one who shook Sinai and spoke from fire. This was the occupation phase of the War of the Gods. Egypt was crushed, the sea was tamed, and now Yahweh planted his banner on a mountain for the whole world to see. Standing there, myself, years later, I could almost feel the echoes of that moment. The desert wind whipping down the slopes, the silence of the monastery library, those ancient manuscripts whispering the same story over and over. That on this mountain, heaven met earth in a way that changed history forever. Sinai wasn't safe, but it was holy. And it was there that Israel's freedom was anchored to something unshakable, the living God. Section 5, the legacy of the war. Here's the thing about Exodus. It isn't locked in the past. It's not just a story about one empire, one river, one mountain. It's a template, a pattern that repeats itself again and again through the Bible. And honestly, through history itself. The War of the Gods didn't stop when Israel marched away from Sinai. Its legacy echoed forward like aftershocks from an earthquake. The Psalms pick it up first, over and over. The poets of Israel sing about the Exodus like it just happened yesterday. Psalm 74 talks about God smashing the heads of sea monsters. Psalm 77 describes the waters trembling at his presence. It's their way of saying, don't forget what he did in Egypt. The same God who split the sea is the God who still fights for us. The Exodus becomes Israel's battle anthem, a way to remember that no idol, no empire, no spiritual power is safe when Yahweh shows up. Then the prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, they all call back to Exodus when they warn Israel or comfort them. When Babylon rose up centuries later, swallowing Jerusalem and dragging people into exile, the prophets reminded them, God once broke Egypt. He can break Babylon too. The Exodus became the lens through which Israel understood every new empire, every new oppressor. Egypt was the blueprint, and God's victory over Egypt was the proof he could do it again. Fast forward to the New Testament. Suddenly, you've got Jesus stepping into the scene, and he starts doing things that sound suspiciously like Exodus all over again. He casts demons into pigs, chaos animals rushing into the sea. He walks on water, mastery over the chaos that ancient people thought untamable. He multiplies bread in the wilderness, manna 2.0. And at the Last Supper, he lifts a cup of wine during Passover and says, "This is my blood, poured out for you." He ties his own death to the Exodus, framing it as a second deliverance, not from Pharaoh this time, but from sin and death itself. And then there's Revelation. The final book of the Bible doesn't just echo Exodus, it goes into a full remix. Plagues return, but global. Seas roar, beasts rise, and Babylon, the stand-in for every corrupt empire, falls. It's the Exodus turned cosmic. The same God who once humiliated Egypt's gods now dismantles the spiritual powers behind every empire that ever tried to play God. Here's where it lands for us today. The War of the Gods didn't end with Egypt Babylon, Rome, or any ancient empire. It's still raging. Only now the idols wear modern clothes. Instead of statues of Ra or Hathor, you've got idols of money, power, technology, celebrity, and self. Pharaoh doesn't show up with a crown. He shows up with a system that enslaves people with debt, addiction, or fear. The battlefield looks different, but the war is exactly the same. Who gets to rule creation? Who gets our allegiance? And who we believe is truly God? That's why Exodus matters right now, because every generation faces its own Egypt, a power that looks unbeatable, a system that feels eternal, and every generation has to decide whether they bow to that false god or trust the one who turns rivers to blood, splits seas, and descends on mountains wrapped in fire. Exodus is more than history. It's prophecy, a reminder that the war of the gods is ongoing, and that the God who won then is still winning right now. Exodus, the war of the gods. All right, so there you have it. Exodus stripped down to its bones, not as a children's story with felt board figures, but as a war report, a campaign of precision strikes against the gods of Egypt, a scene turned into a battlefield, a mountain shaking like the throne room of the universe, and a legacy that stretches from ancient deserts to the headlines we're living in right now. If Exodus teaches us anything, it's this: false gods don't go down easy, but they do go down. Empires rise, flex, and promise to last forever, but history says otherwise. The living God doesn't just topple idols, he exposes them for what they are. And the best part, his people don't win by their own strength. They stand still and watch him fight. That's a lesson we need as much today as Israel did 3,000 years ago. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. We've all got our Egypts, our pharaohs, our false gods dressed up in power suits, glowing screens, or dollar signs. And Exodus isn't just calling us to marvel at what God did back then. It's asking whether we're ready to let him dismantle the false gods we've let into our own lives now. All right. This has been Broadcasting Seeds. I'm Bennett Tanton. If you got something out of this episode, do me a solid favor. Like, share, and leave a quick review. That's how the show grows, and it's how these seeds get planted in more people's minds. Tell a friend who thinks the Bible is boring that it's actually one of the most supernatural war stories ever told. Next time, we'll crack open another story, another place where the veil between the natural and supernatural is thinner than you think. Until then, remember, history isn't dead, and neither is the war behind it. Stay awake, stay sharp, and keep your eyes open.
The river bled red, and the idols fell. Darkness came down, no light could rebel. Magicians tried, but their power broke. Every god of Egypt swallowed in smoke. Through the fire, through the flood, every plague was written Yeah.